what's going on guys? Arekkz here, welcome back to another Anthem video, and today I want to talk about patch 1.04. It went live today, and of course, with that comes legendary missions, the Elysian chests, the FOV slider, the DLSS support, all the kind of stuff they spoke about in the most recent live stream. If you guys saw the video I uploaded the other day, then I went over all of that stuff. But on top of that, there are also a bunch of bug fixes and also some buffs and changes to gear, abilities, and components. So in this video, I'm going to go through and cherry pick some of the most important things. I'm not going to read through everything because there's a Reddit post that the guys over at BioWare put together and it goes over absolutely everything, and I will link that down below for those of you guys that want to read it, because honestly, if I read through it, we would be here until next week. So I'm going to focus on the stuff that you guys really want to know, and if you want to draw deeper, the link is there for you. So if you do enjoy this, then a like would be super appreciated. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of these changes, and of course, if you haven't entered our giveaway for a chance to win a Pokemon Let's Go Nintendo Switch, then the link to that is in the description box down below. Now, if we turn our attention to the buffs, the changes, and the improvements to gear, firstly, some broad Masterwork changes. They've doubled the rate at which Masterwork gear with multiple charges regain charges, and that applies to Venom Darts for the Ranger, the Colossus' Railgun, the Interceptor's Cluster Mine, the Storm's Ice Storm, and the Storm's Ball Lightning, of course the Masterwork versions. They've also fixed several exploits related to Masterworks and legendary drops that were allowing unintended drop rates when the player was downed, and they've also added new audio effects when Masterworks and legendaries drop in-game, which should hopefully make it a little bit more exciting. However, turning our attention more specifically to Javelin gear pieces and components, starting off with the Colossus, because let's be honest, it's the best Javelin. It also happens to be at the top of the patch notes, so we're going alphabetically. But on the component front, the ablative shielding, they've increased the buff to 40% for 10 seconds, and previously it was 20% for 5 seconds. Grand Entrance, they've improved the ability to reliably trigger on heavy impacts and air melee slams. For Reinforced Hull, they've increased the buff to 33%, it was previously 20%, and they've removed the cooldown. For Shock Treatment, they've now changed it from what it was before to taking damage increases all damage by 8% for 10 seconds, and it can stack up to 10 times, so that's actually far more useful than the previous version, which just lowered thruster heat build-up when you hit enemies. And Star Wars Badge, now when you are hit with a status effect, it increases all gear damage by 40% for 10 seconds. And then also Synchronized Frame, they've changed it to hitting an enemy from defeating an enemy. So that's just kind of generally speaking pretty useful. However, on the gear front, they have Fist of the Crucible. So now the way that it works is that when you hit an enemy, it increases flamethrower damage by 12% for 10 seconds and can stack up to 10 times, whereas previously you needed to kill an enemy. So this just means, especially, given the way the flamethrower works, you can just spray enemies and you can benefit from this instantly. Best Defense, which is a core part of my loadout, they've increased the base damage for this by 25%. Black Powder, they've increased the base damage by 25%, and the cooldown has been reduced to 1 second, it was previously 4. Solvent Green, they've increased the base damage by 40%, and Titan's Hail, they've now changed it so that special shells burst across a wide area and they create a large physical explosion for each enemy that is hit, whereas previously it was just simply able to trigger explosive combos. So all up, some rather interesting changes there. I'm definitely looking forward to testing out some of those ones. I'm going to dive in myself and give those a quick run through. Moving on from there to the Interceptor, for your components, the survival algorithm has been increased to 40% for 10 seconds, up from 20% for 10 seconds. Talisman of Power has been increased to 60% for 10 seconds. Conductive Lattice now works so that melee hits will detonate an electric explosion and can occur every 2 seconds. The Vengeance Matrix will now work so that on low armor, damage taken is reduced by 50% for 10 seconds. Way of Salvage has been increased to 40% for 10 seconds, up from the previous 5 seconds. Way of the Swift has been increased to 60% for 10 seconds, up from the previous 50% for 5 seconds. Way of the Bold has been increased to 40% armor restored from 20%, and Way of Integration has been increased to 30% for 10 seconds, up from 30% for 5 seconds. As for your gear, you have Karif's Talon. They've increased the base kick damage by 200%, and they've removed the cooldown, and they've also increased it to 50% armor restored. Rhaenyra's Charge, they've increased the base damage by 25% and removed the cooldown. Serpent's Veil, they've increased the base damage to 35%, and they've also changed the trigger to on melee hit from melee kills from before, so again, simply by landing this you can proc that. Shadow Claw has now changed so that it now launches 2 Wraith projectiles that seek the enemies, and Absolute Zero, they've removed the requirement of being above the target, and they've also increased the explosion damage. For the Ranger, The range of components, tactical advantage, now works so that it increases your engine heat threshold by 50% and weak point hits lower thruster heat buildup by 80% for 10 seconds. Badge of Devastation now increases assault launcher damage by 30%. Performing a large hit streak of 10 will instantly add 3% ultimate charge. Victor's Resolve will now increase blast damage by 50% and decrease impact damage by 20%, so performing a small multi-hit of 2 instantly restores 25% armor. Your Second Wind, which was previously Defensive Bulwark, will now increase all gun damage by 25%, and on low health it increases gun damage by 60% for 10 seconds, up from the previously 25%. Elemental Ops will now work so that it increases your fire damage and max heat capacity by 50% and also fire resistance by 50%, and on a hit streak of 5 it applies acid to the target. Combined Arms will now work so that it increases your grenade damage by 30% and hitting an enemy with assault launcher gear increases your grenade damage by 60% for 10 seconds. Airborne Advantage will now increase impact damage by 50% and decrease blast damage by 20%, and hovering increases all resistances by 25%. Tip of the Spear will now see combo damage increase by 60%, and performing a combo restores 40% of armor to nearby allies. General's Favour will now increase your grenade recharge by 40%, and hitting an enemy with a melee increases your grenade damage by 45% for 10 seconds. And then finally, Vanguard's Badge. It increases your melee damage by 40% and electric effects by 40%, and performing a melee restores 40% shield. So that's all your components. For your gear pieces, you have Argo's Mace, for which they've increased the base damage by 25%, Avenger's Boon, where they've increased the melee damage by 210% for 20 seconds, previously it was 110 for 20 seconds. Cold-Blooded has been changed to On Hit, increased melee damage by 235% for 10 seconds. Ember's Launch has had its explosion damage increased, Explosive Blaze has changed to On Hit and they've removed the cooldown. Grand Opening now splits into Seeking Submunitions, and Striker's Fury, hitting enemies grants 60% increased weapon damage for 20 seconds. Recurring Vengeance now functions so that when you detonate a combo, it grants 100% charge, and the Gambit, they've increased the damage of ice explosions. And finally, for the Storm, quite a few things to go through here. Firstly, on your component front, Amulet of Winter has been increased to 30% damage for 20 seconds. Mark of Clarity has been increased to 40% armor restored with no cooldown. Mark of Ruin has been changed so that it now increases fire damage and fire effect, and after applying a status effect, it increases fire damage by 50% for 10 seconds. Mark of Wrath now increases gear damage and lowers gear recharge rate, and detonating a combo causes large electrical explosions. Token of Daring now increases your elemental damage and decreases physical damage. On shield break, it'll also instantly recharge all gear. Token of the Master has been increased to 60% for 10 seconds, it was previously 5 seconds. Token of the Pupil has also been increased to 60% for 10 seconds, which was also previously 5 seconds. Tome of Precision has now changed so that it now increases electric damage and electric effect, and defeating an enemy increases elemental damage by 40% for 10 seconds, and Vanguard's Token has been increased to 40% for 10 seconds, up from the previous 10% for 20 seconds. As for your gear, you have Hailstorm's Renewal. They've removed the requirement of being above the target, and they've also increased the base damage by 25%. Seal of the Open Mind, they've removed the requirement again of being above the target, and it now permanently has 2 charges. Venomous Blaze, they've increased the base damage by 50%, changed from every 3rd hit to every 3rd consecutive hit. Winter's Wrath, they've increased the base number of charges and the recharge rate. 10,000 Suns has been upgraded so that now after hitting an enemy you gain 10% increased damage for 10 seconds, stacking up to 10, as opposed to the previous 5% increased damage for 5 seconds, which can stack up to 20. And then finally, Black Ice, they've changed to hitting an enemy freezes nearby creatures. Previously it was defeating an enemy. So as you can see, there's obviously a lot of stuff to go through there. I appreciate that was a wall of text. And obviously if you want to read that for yourself, again, don't forget you can click the link in the description box down below. But largely speaking, that is a buff to a lot of your abilities. So if there were some before that you perhaps didn't consider using, maybe it's worth revisiting them in light of some of these changes. And the final thing I want to note is they've added a few more universal masterwork components. They said they were going to add some of these to sort of fill some gaps outside of the ones that are class or Javelin specific. And the ones that have been added, these are unique masterwork components that only drop in Grandmaster 1, 2 and 3 difficulties. You have Bloodlust, which is an inscribed component that increases melee weapon damage. It increases melee damage by 75% for 10 seconds when killing an enemy by using melee. You have Acid Slugs, which adds specialized storage for enhanced shotgun ammunition and increases damage. And if you hit 7 shotgun shots in a single burst, it applies acid on the target. Giant Slayer adds specialized storage for enhanced marksman rifle ammunition and increases damage. It also increases weak point damage by 50% after a consecutive marksman rifle hit streak of 5. Focus Freeze adds specialized storage for enhanced light machine gun ammunition and increases damage. And on a consecutive LMG hit streak of 10, it'll freeze the target. And Feedback Loop now adds storage for assault rifles, increases damage, and increases damage resistance by 50% for 10 seconds when firing the last shot in an assault rifle magazine. Then finally, a few more things for the Javelins. The Interceptor melee can now execute multiple melee attacks when you just simply hold down the button. The Interceptor can now detonate combos even if they have an aura currently active. They've also increased the max stamina or thruster meter for all Javelins by 20%, and they've reduced the base overheat duration for all Javelins by 20%, which was mentioned in the most recent livestream. So, those are some of the best bits from the patch notes. As mentioned, there are a few more things worth going over, so if you guys do want to give it a read, then be sure to check out that link. But largely speaking, there are some really cool changes anyway, so definitely looking forward to jumping back in. Obviously, pairing that with the new legendary missions and the Elysian chest, there's definitely a few things worth checking out in this latest update. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Be sure to keep it locked because I'll have more videos later on this week going over some of the other changes and give you guys a chance to look at the DLSS support as well as some of the Elysian chest stuff too. Thanks very much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you want to check out some more awesome stuff from us here at Arekkz Gaming, then you should definitely try to catch TwoSixNine and Paradise Central streaming 6 days a week. You can find a link to the multi-stream in the description box down below. They play a wide range of games, and what's more, we also have the end game store. By watching their streams, you earn currency, and you can redeem that currency on the endgame store for really cool prizes. Those can range from things like games, comics, and figures, all the way up to controllers, capture cards, and even consoles. So definitely drop by and become part of the community. Of course, if you enjoyed this video, then make sure you're subscribed and be sure to click on that little bell icon to turn on notifications so you don't miss our next upload. You can watch more videos by clicking on the options here. But once again, thanks very much for watching, take it easy, catch you next time, peace out.